This happened last month. I'm an aerospace engineer. I work on satellites at an old research facility far from town. It's quiet there, surrounded by empty fields. I often stayed late. Ever since my mom passed, I found comfort in the hum of machines. But what happened that night still haunts me. I was focused on analyzing transmission data. The numbers and waveforms filled my screen, and I lost track of time. It was past midnight. I could hear the whir of machines. It was a familiar sound, but then a crackle broke through the quiet. I leaned closer, confused. The radio picked something up. It wasn't normal. The voice came through distorted, mixed with static. It sent chills down my spine. I thought about shutting it off, but I couldn't. I felt drawn to the message. I strained to catch every word. What I heard was jumbled and eerie. It felt like someone, or something, was trying to reach out. The days that followed were strange. I noticed glitches on my computer. The screen flickered, and shadowy figures flashed briefly. My heart raced as I wondered if I was being monitored. Then, I noticed that some of my colleagues began to vanish. I heard whispers in the break room about the transmission. People were worried, but I buried myself in work. I thought it had to be stress, nothing more. Then, one night in the empty halls, I saw him. A coworker I hadn't seen for days. He stood there, pale and stiff. I felt a wave of relief wash over me until I realized he wasn't moving. I walked closer and asked, "Hey, are you okay?" No response. I stepped back, my stomach dropping. "What's going on?" He just stared blankly. It was unnerving. Feeling unsettled, I left him there and quickened my pace. I thought I was losing my mind. I overheard talking in hushed voices later. They mentioned the origins of the transmission. They said it could hold something bigger than us. I felt a chill, like icy fingers crawling up my spine. Things escalated fast after that. Doors slammed shut, lights flickered, and I felt an oppressive presence in the air. I looked over my shoulder, convinced something watched me. I couldn't shake the feeling of being followed. It felt wrong, but I didn't know what to do. Then came the night I sat in front of my terminal. My hand shook as I typed out the details of the transmission, hitting send. A knot formed in my stomach, and that's when the lights went out. Darkness wrapped around me, and I felt a cold dread. I tried to stay calm as I heard a low voice calling my name. My heart raced. I turned slowly, barely breathing. The voice echoed, hauntingly familiar. Why did it feel like the darkness was closing in on me? And then I heard it again, closer this time. It was right behind me. I froze, my body locked in place. The cold seeped into my bones as I slowly turned back, half expecting to see a face I knew. But it wasn't. Instead, it was just darkness, merging with the shadows that even the dim emergency lights couldn't reach. The voice had stopped. Silence engulfed the room. I tried to rationalize my fear, thinking it was just the stress of the past weeks catching up to me. But the silence felt pregnant with tension, as if the air itself was pressing against my chest. I blinked rapidly, willing my eyes to adjust, searching for any sign of movement. Nothing. Suddenly, the lights flickered back to life, bathing the room in harsh fluorescent light. I could see my workstation, the screens illuminated with the data I had been analyzing. Everything appeared normal, too normal. But then, there was a dark shape behind me, just a fleeting shadow. It was gone before I could fully comprehend it, leaving me questioning the reality around me. Nervous energy coursed through me. I quickly typed a message in the group chat for my colleagues, my fingers shaking as I typed, "Something's wrong at the facility. People are acting strange. I think we need to regroup." I hit send and stared at the screen, waiting for a response. Minutes crawled by, and just as I was about to lose hope, a reply came through. "Meet us in the break room." I took a deep breath and stood up, my legs feeling shaky. The hallway seemed longer than it ever had. Each step echoed, reminding me of how alone I truly was. I couldn't shake the feeling that someone, or something, was following me. I glanced over my shoulder, but saw only the flickering lights behind me. When I reached the break room, I found 3 of my colleagues gathered, their expressions drawn tight with worry. They looked up as I entered. "Thank God you're here," one said, his voice barely above a whisper. "We've got to talk about the transmission." The atmosphere crackled with unease. I took a seat at the table, trying to calm the racing thoughts in my head. The others shared their experiences. Glitches in their technology, strange occurrences at home. One even mentioned hearing the same voice calling their name. I felt a chill wash over me. It was as if each of us had been pulled into a web of fear, expected to unravel it together. Then one of them produced a small device. It was an old radio, the same model I had heard the Unsettling transmission from. "I brought this in case we could pick up something more," they said, flicking it on. The static hissed and crackled, then fell silent. It was ominous. Suddenly, all the room's lights flickered violently before dying out again. Darkness swallowed us, plunging the space into an unsettling silence. I felt my heart pound in my chest. Then, in the pitch black, a cold breeze swept through, carrying with it that same low voice. This time, it was clearer, almost as if it was whispering secrets meant only for us. Then everything went silent again, but the chill remained, wrapping around us like a shroud. I was barely able to breathe when someone gasped. What was that? In that moment we knew we were not alone. The darkness lingered longer than I expected. My heart raced, almost drowning out the world around me. I reached out blindly, hoping for a solid surface, and felt the cool metal of the table beneath my fingers. "Is everyone okay?" I whispered, but my voice sounded small. Another voice broke the stillness. It was Mark, his tone shaky. "I can't see anything." I fumbled for my phone, the blue glow illuminating the room just enough to see the faint outlines of my colleagues. They huddled close, fear etched on their faces. "Let's stay together," I urged, my voice steadier than I felt. Then, a crackle echoed across the room. The radio was still on, and it seemed to be picking up something, static. Then a voice, partially buried under interference. "Return. You must return." We all froze, the words hanging in the air. I exchanged a glance with Maria, who looked just as terrified as I felt. "What does that mean?" she asked, her voice quivering. I didn't have an answer, but the implications hung heavily over us like a storm cloud. The voice faded out, and the silence returned, thicker than before. "Let's try to figure this out," I suggested. "Mark, do you know how to tune that thing? Maybe we can get a clearer signal." He fumbled with the knobs, the static buzzing in response. I leaned closer, the hair on my arms standing on end. Each twist of the dial made my pulse quicken, the tension stretching painfully thin. Then, just as Mark adjusted it again, the light snapped back on, blinding us momentarily. I squinted against the brightness, quickly scanning the room. Nothing seemed amiss, yet the feeling of wrongness lingered. "Did you hear that last part?" I asked, trying to shove aside my fear. "Return? It sounded urgent." "Urgent?" Mark echoed, a mixture of dread and skepticism in his voice. "Or a warning?" Before I could respond, there was a loud crash from the far side of the break room. I jumped, instinctively stepping back. My heart raced as I turned toward the source of the sound. "Stay back!" I shouted, moving to shield Maria, who had begun to tremble in fear. Another crashing sound followed, this time accompanied by a low thud, like something heavy being dropped. "Hello?" I called out, but only silence answered. All my instincts screamed at me that we needed to get out. Then Mark's eyes widened, and he pointed. "Look!" I followed his gaze to the far wall where a dark shape was creeping into view. It looked like a figure, outlined in shadows, almost blending into the darkness despite the lights above. My breath caught in my throat. Before I could process what I was seeing, the figure lunged forward, its outline sharpening like a predator ready to strike. I turned to the others, panic igniting my instincts. "Run!" I shouted, and we bolted for the door. The figure moved in a blur behind us, the air thick with fear and uncertainty. We raced through the hallway, but dread washed over me. Whatever it was coming for us. I felt as if we were being hunted. Then came the realization. We weren't just hearing voices or glitchy transmissions anymore. We were living it. We burst through the exit door into the main corridor, my lungs burning from the cold air rushing in. My heart pounded in my chest, each beat echoing the urgency of our situation. I glanced back, half expecting to see the shadowy figure close behind us, but the hall was empty. For now. "Where do we go?" Maria gasped, her face pale. The fear in her eyes mirrored what I felt. I could barely think, but I knew we had to keep moving. We couldn't linger in one spot. The idea of retreating back to the break room was unbearable. "There's an emergency exit at the end of the hall," I said, my voice just above a whisper. "We should head there." Mark nodded, but his expression was strained as he looked down the dimly lit corridor. "What if it's still there? We'll be trapped." I shot him a frustrated look. "We can't stay here and wait for whatever that was to find us. We have to move." We sprinted down the corridor, the fluorescent lights flickering above us like warnings. As we reached the end of the hall, I hesitated at the heavy door. I could feel the weight of its presence, a final barrier between us and whatever lay outside. "On 3, I said, trying to rally my shaky nerves. 1, 2, 3. We shoved the door open and stumbled into the stairwell. I could hear the faint echo of the wind outside, but it felt like distant thunder. The feeling of being hunted loomed larger. I quickly took the lead, bounding down the stairs, while Mark and Maria followed closely, their footsteps a beat behind mine. As we reached the bottom, I could see a sliver of light beneath another door. Relief surged through me, but it was short-lived when I heard it, a low growl coming from behind. Instinct kicked in, and I froze, adrenaline coursing through me. "Did you hear that?" I whispered, my heart in my throat. The others nodded, eyes wide. Before I could decide what to do, Mark turned and rushed back up the stairs. "We can't let it catch us," he yelled, but I knew we were out of time. I clutched Maria's wrist. "We either open that door or face whatever is hunting us." With a deep breath, I moved toward the door, trembling hands grasping the cold handle. I turned it slowly, every creak of the hinges echoing like a disaster waiting to happen. But just as I swung the door open, we were met with a blinding flash of light, a strobe effect that engulfed the room beyond. And then, a flash of realization struck me. Through the chaos of the moment, I could see equipment buzzing with life, screens flashing data that shouldn't exist. That was when I noticed it. An old radio transmitter, identical to the one we had in the break room, but this one was transmitting. The same voice we had heard before permeated the air now, clearer than ever. "Return! You must return! For the truth lies beyond." I stepped back, my mind racing. What does that mean? And then came the sound, the growling, closer now, louder. I turned to see shadows shifting in the doorway behind us. We had no choice but to confront this thing or unravel the truth together. "Go, go!" I shouted, pushing Maria forward into the room. But just as I stepped inside myself, panic gripped me. An image flashed in my mind. What if that voice wasn't trying to warn us, but to draw us in, to keep us forever? That's when I felt it. A hand, cold and clammy, grabbed my shoulder, pulling me back into the darkness. The grip tightened on my shoulder, and a chill ran through me. I spun around, heart racing, face to face with the shadowy figure that had stalked us from the beginning. Its features were indistinct, blending into the dark, but I felt the malevolence radiating from it. "Run!" I screamed, shoving Maria further into the room. She hesitated before darting inside, with Mark right behind her. I could feel the creature's breath, icy and rancid, on my neck. I didn't think. I just reacted. I yanked my arm free and stumbled into the room, the door swinging shut behind me with a resounding thud. The blinding lights flickered on and off, casting jagged shadows against the walls. I turned to face the now locked door, panting heavily. The strobe effect made it hard to focus, but there was no time to waste. The growling sounded muffled but ominous, as if the creature was just outside, waiting for our inevitable return. "Where are we?" Maria whispered, her eyes darting around. I scanned the room. It was filled with screens, each displaying streams of incomprehensible data. Some showed images of stars and planets, while others blinked with cryptic symbols. In the corner stood the radio transmitter, its lights flickering like a heartbeat. "It's like a command center," Mark said, stepping closer to one of the screens. "But for what?" Then it hit me. This was the heart of their operation. Was this place tied to whatever was hunting us? And how did it connect to the transmission? "I think it's monitoring something," I said, racing to the nearest screen. I jabbed at the controls, desperate to find something useful. "Maybe it can help us." As I fiddled with the buttons, the screen changed to display a live video feed. It showed a room that looked disturbingly similar to ours, furniture overturned, papers scattered. But in the corner, just beyond the frame, a flash of movement caught my attention. "No. Please," I stammered. "What?" Maria asked. I leaned closer to the screen, frowning. "There's someone in there. They're in trouble, and I think they're—" My voice trailed off. They were recording the same transmission we had heard, the same message calling us back. Mark leaned over my shoulder, wide-eyed. Are they trying to warn us or keep us here?" Just then, a loud bang reverberated against the door, a powerful force slamming against it. The creature was trying to get in. Fear gripped my throat. "We need to figure out how to get out of here now." Staring at the transmitter, a thought struck me. If we play the transmission, maybe we can lure it away, or, I don't know, do something. Mark and Maria exchanged uncertain glances, but it was a chance. "Do it," Maria urged. I raced toward the old transmitter, my palms sweating. As I flipped switches, the growling intensified. It felt like the creature was aware, moving closer. Then I activated the transmission, the voice echoing through the room. "Return. You must return." The room shook as something slammed against the door once more, this time more violently. It rattled on its hinges, threatening to burst open. "I don't know how long this will hold," I shouted over the roar. But that's when I noticed it. A blinking red light on the transmitter. An emergency beacon. I hesitated, recalling what I'd seen on the screen. I had to choose. Activate the beacon to signal for help from outside, risking whatever was lurking, or keep playing the recording, drawing it closer. "Do it!" Mark implored, but before I could respond, the door splintered, and then everything went dark. My heart pounded in the silence that followed. I felt my breath quicken as shadows danced around me. I was in complete darkness, but my other senses heightened. I could smell the metallic tang in the air and hear the faint ring of the transmitter continuing its eerie message. "Guys?" Maria's voice trembled, cutting through the quiet. "Here," I replied, reaching out blindly. I found her shoulder and squeezed. I needed to know we were still together. "What's happening?" Mark asked, his voice tight. I didn't know. I felt around for the transmitter and found it, the cool metal beneath my fingers. I flicked the controls, but nothing responded. The panic in my chest tightened. We were trapped. Suddenly, the lights flickered faintly back to life. But it wasn't the harsh fluorescent lights I'd expected. Instead, a soft glow illuminated the room. I squinted, trying to adjust my vision. The screens were still lit, but now they displayed something else. A countdown. The numbers slowly ticking down from 3 minutes. "What is that?" Maria asked, her face pale in the dim light. I didn't answer. I felt a surge of dread. "We need to figure out what it means. Fast!" I rushed over to the nearest screen, scanning the chaotic images swirling across. They seemed to shift and change, but one thing was clear. It didn't bode well for us. Mark moved beside me, eyes wide with horror. "Is it a timer?" "It looks like it," I said, heart sinking further. "We need to disable it or get out of here before it gets to 0. As our eyes swept over the screens, desperate for a clue, I noticed something amidst the chaos, a shape forming in the darkness behind us, inching closer. I turned to see... another figure? "No!" I shouted, moving forward. It wasn't just the 3 of us anymore. Then I realized the countdown wasn't just numbers. I recalled the feeds. They were telling us something vital, something we should understand, but couldn't. "Wait, the broadcast. It has to mean something," I said. "What if the transmission isn't just a warning, but a trigger?" Mark's eyes widened. "A trigger for what?" But before I could respond, that familiar growling echoed through the room, but louder this time. It reverberated in my bones. The creature from before was somehow in here with us, filling the room with its malevolent presence. I felt the back of my neck prickle, and the hair stood on end. "We need to split up," I urged, even though every fiber of my being screamed against it. At this point, we needed to gather as much information as possible, and quickly. "Are you crazy?" Maria protested, her eyes wide. "It's the only choice we have. If we can figure out what the countdown means, we might have a chance," I insisted. Mark reluctantly nodded. "Okay, but let's be quick." "We'll meet back here in 2 minutes," I said, trying to inject confidence into my voice. But deep down, I felt a sinking dread. As we dispersed, the surroundings felt charged, and an eerie stillness settled over everything. My breath echoed loudly in the tense silence, drowning out the creature's distant growls. That's when I saw it. A flash of something silver caught my eye behind one of the screens. I moved closer, curiosity coursing through me despite the urgent sense of danger. It was a device, covered in dust, buried under the equipment. I couldn't help but think, was this our answer? Or had I just stepped deeper into a trap? With 2 minutes left, whatever it was seemed to pulse with a life of its own. I reached for it, heart racing, unaware that time was running out. My fingers brushed against the cold surface of the device. It was compact, almost elegant in its design amidst the chaos around me. My mind raced as I tried to recall anything that might relate to it. Was it a weapon? A way to stop the countdown? The glow from the screens bathed my shaking hands in an eerie light. I flicked the device over and saw wires snaking out from underneath. It looked like some sort of control panel. I held my breath and pressed one of the buttons. Nothing happened. "Maya, hurry!" Maria's urgent plea echoed through the room, but I couldn't break my gaze from the device. It felt significant, like it held answers we desperately needed. I pressed another button, but it only blinked in response. Anxiety gnawed at me as I thought of the countdown ticking away. A quick glance at the main screen confirmed less than a minute left. The numbers loomed ominously, nearly mocking us with their slow descent. What else could I do? I scanned the control panel and noticed a small screen light up. Symbols flashed across it, indecipherable letters and numbers zipping by far too quickly for me to grasp. "Maya!" Mark's voice was now close, panic lacing through his tone. "Did you find anything?" "I think I have," I called back. "But I can't understand this." "Just figure it out," he shouted. Adrenaline surged as I activated a different button. A series of beeping sounds erupted from the device, punctuated by an alarming red light. I let out a breath, my mind spiraling with thoughts. Was I making things worse? "Get away from the screens!" Maria shrieked suddenly. I turned just in time to see the shadow moving again, this time darting toward the flickering images. My stomach dropped. The creature was coming for us, and the countdown was almost up. "Don't panic!" I shouted, but the tremor in my own voice betrayed me. The air seemed to grow thicker, strangling my resolve. The darkness felt alive, gathering around the edges of my vision. In that moment, I made a decision. Gripping the device tightly, I stepped back from the screens, feeling the pulse of the countdown in my gut. We need to get out. We can't let it... But before I could finish my sentence, the lights above us flickered violently. The screens blared with static, drowning out my voice. I glanced at Mark and Maria. Their eyes were wide with fear as they backed away from the figures that emerged from the shadows. "That's not just one!" Mark shouted, pointing. I felt a chill race down my spine. More figures. Multiple shadows undulated toward us, their shapes twisting unnaturally. The growls from before morphed into deep, rumbling laughter that echoed in my skull. "Run!" I yelled as I turned, adrenaline kicking in. The device slipped from my hands, clattering to the floor, but I didn't stop. My heart raced as I sprinted past the screens, the countdown an incessant ticking clock in my mind. I looked back and saw Mark and Maria racing behind me, but the shadows were fast, far too fast. With less than 15 seconds left, we had to reach the door. I could already feel the entity's presence pulsing behind us, desperation clawing at the edges of my sanity. The countdown droned on, a thundering reminder of our impending doom. I pushed through the door, noting that my voice echoed wildly in the hallway. We needed to regroup. They had to trust me. I glanced back. We were all we had left. Then the final seconds hit. The ground beneath us rumbled violently. The rumble turned into a violent quake, shaking the walls, making it harder to keep my feet. I stumbled, catching myself against the doorframe as I watched Mark and Maria fight against the tremors. Panic surged through me like a wave. We had to move. "Stay close," I shouted, but the noise swallowed my voice. The echoes of the shadows resonated, mingling with the frantic beating of my heart. I pressed forward down the narrow corridor, the flickering overhead lights casting eerie shapes against the walls. I remembered the layout of the facility. Somewhere ahead was the emergency exit. It felt like it was miles away. The rumble intensified, and I glanced behind me. The shadows were no longer merely shapes, they were gaining ground. I could see glowing eyes fixated on us, predatory and relentless. We dashed along the corridor, and then I felt it. A sharp pain in my ankle as I tripped over something on the floor. I fell hard. Pain shot through me, but I kept moving, scrambling to my feet as quickly as I could. "Come on!" I yelled again, forcing my legs to cooperate as I took off after Mark and Maria. I could see the door at the end of the hall. It felt like a beacon of hope in a world gone mad. We just had to reach it. As we neared, the door loomed larger, but so did the shadows. They were almost upon us. I caught a glimpse of their jagged teeth, a flash of wiry limbs darting through the chaos. My stomach twisted, bile rising in my throat. "There!" Mark shouted. He reached for the door handle, the metal glimmering under the lights, but as he tried to pull it open, it wouldn't budge. His face fell. "It's locked!" "Try again!" Maria shouted, her eyes wide with panic. I turned to face the shadows that were closing in, my breath quickening. There was no time. I grabbed Mark's arm and rushed him aside. I had to do something. My eyes landed on the device that had fallen earlier, still glowing ominously on the floor. That small control panel might be our only hope. "Wait!" I yelled, racing back, my heart jackhammering against my chest. I could feel the creature's breath on my neck. I bent down, grabbed it, and fumbled with the buttons frantically. "Come on! Come on!" I pleaded under my breath as I pressed them in sequence, hoping for anything relevant. A way to override the system, a panic button, something. Just as another tremor struck, a bright light flashed from the device. Then, unexpectedly, I felt a pull, a strange energy enveloping me. It surged through the air like electricity. I gasped, my heart racing faster, and then silence. I turned to find Mark and Maria staring, their expressions a mixture of awe and fear. "What did you do?" Mark asked, his voice barely a whisper. I don't know," I replied, looking back to the door. There was no sign of the shadows anymore, just darkness and uncertainty. But then I noticed something. A faint, glowing outline appeared in the doorframe. That's when I saw it. A keyhole, shimmering beneath the surface. My pulse quickened. Maybe this could work. But as I approached the door, feeling a sense of hope growing stronger, the walls shook again. This time, something else materialized from the dark. An even larger shadow, more solid and menacing, stepped into view behind us. "Run!" I shouted one more time, but this time I had no clear direction. I barely had time to think. The sheer size of the shadow behind us made my heart drop. I turned and sprinted down the hall, my legs barely keeping up with my racing thoughts. "This way!" I yelled, hoping Mark and Maria were behind me. The lights flickered erratically, making it hard to see. I glanced back just in time to see the massive creature surge forward. It had to be at least 10 feet tall, its form undulating like dark smoke, shifting and stretching with each frantic step it took. We ducked around a corner, barely avoiding its grasp. The air felt heavy. Every breath I took was filled with the scent of burnt metal and something else, something rancid. I could feel the panic rising again, but I pushed it down. I had to focus on getting us out. "Where now?" Maria gasped. Urgency and hysteria tinged her voice. "There should be a stairwell," I shouted, trying to remember the layout. "If we can make it to the upper floors, there might be a way outside." Mark nodded, determination etching his features. "Let's keep moving." We raced through narrow hallways, the sounds of my friend's footsteps echoing around us. I risked another glance back. The creature had slowed slightly, but it was still coming. The glowing eyes pierced through the darkness, and I felt its hunger. We turned another corner, and there it was, the stairwell door, just ahead. "Get in!" I shouted, lunging for the handle. I pushed it open and ushered my friends inside. We scrambled into the stairwell, and I closed the door behind us, leaning against it to catch my breath. As we started up the stairs, I felt a sense of false safety. The thick steel around us would slow the creature, but if it got through, we'd be trapped. "Do you think it'll follow us?" Maria asked, her voice shaky as we ascended. "I don't know," I admitted, glancing back down the stairs, "but we can't stop to find out." We climbed higher, every step making me acutely aware of how much time we had left. The tremors still rumbled beneath us, making the walls shudder. I was starting to feel a sense of hopelessness. It was like we were in a nightmare, attempting to escape something with no clear way out. We reached the 3rd floor and sprinted towards an exit sign glowing faintly in the dim light. As we neared, I saw the door ahead was slightly ajar. "Just a bit more," I urged, pushing through the fatigue. Every muscle in my body screamed for rest, but I didn't have the luxury of slowing down. Suddenly, a crash sounded from the stairs below. It echoed throughout the stairwell, and then we heard it, a shriek, raw and primal. It reverberated through the air, piercing my ears. My stomach dropped. "What was that?" Mark whispered, frozen in place. "I don't want to stick around to find out," I said, bolting for the door. I pushed it open, only to face an empty hallway. "Where's the exit?" Maria asked, her voice barely a whisper. That's when I realized, in the chaos, I had neglected to check if there was still a way out. The exit sign wasn't leading outside. It was a dead end. Panic surged again, mixed with dread. I turned back towards the stairs, my heart racing. The creature was getting closer. A flicker of movement caught my eye in the shadows of the hallway. I blinked, trying to make sense of what I was seeing. There, crouched in the corner, was another figure. Someone else was here. "Who are you?" I called, but there was no answer. Just a pair of eyes staring back at me with the same mix of fear and desperation I felt. I had to make a choice. Face the unknown or risk confronting the monster behind me. The creature's roar echoed through the building, an ominous reminder of the danger on our heels. I felt time slipping away, the heavy weight of each second hanging in the air. The figure, shrouded in darkness, remained motionless, and the uncertainty tugged at me. But I couldn't afford to hesitate. "Come with us!" I shouted to the shadowy figure, my heart racing. They stirred, eyes reflecting something halfway between hope and fear. Just then, the ground beneath me rumbled. "Please!" I begged, looking back toward Mark and Maria, who were still apprehensively near the exit door. "We need to move!" The figure finally stepped into the dim light, and I gasped. It was someone I recognized from another department, someone I thought was missing. No longer a member of our team, but a face from the past, Jason. "I'm not going back down," he said, a quiver in his voice. "It's not safe." "Then come with us," I urged. "We can figure something out together." He hesitated, glancing toward the stairwell where the creature was moving closer, its growls resonating in the walls like thunder. "They're hunting us," he murmured, terror etched on his features. But time was running out. "We don't have a choice," I cried, grabbing his arm and pulling him toward us. He eyed Mark and Maria, clearly weighing his options. The cacophony of the monstrous entity grew louder, and with a sudden surge of adrenaline, Jason made a decision. "All right, let's go." We rushed toward the exit door, pulse pounding in my ears, feeling the air thicken with each step. Mark pushed it open wider, revealing a hallway lined with flickering overhead lights. It felt like a labyrinth, and I had no idea where to turn. "Do you know the way?" I asked Jason, my voice barely above a whisper. "Follow me!" he ordered, darting ahead. We followed, pushing through exhaustion as we navigated the maze of empty corridors. The sensation of being hunted heightened as every shadow and shift in the air felt charged with unease. As we rounded a corner, I glanced back. The vague outline of the creature was gaining ground, its presence palpable and suffocating. The growl morphed into a guttural noise, a promise of its relentless pursuit. "It's right behind us," I shouted. With newfound determination, we pressed forward, turning through more corridors that looked all too similar. My head spun with uncertainty. Where was the exit? Would we make it out alive? Jason pushed on, glancing back at us with fierce urgency. "This way!" he yelled, veering left toward a dimly lit exit sign. As we sprinted, the flickering lights cast bizarre shadows that danced along the walls. I felt as if they teased us, taunting our fear. Moments later, we burst through a set of double doors that led into a larger room, another command center, but with windows that revealed the outside world bathed in moonlight. My heart soared for just a moment. "Finally, an exit!" Maria exclaimed. But as we moved closer, the shadows deepened, swirling around us unexpectedly. The air grew cold again, thick with a dread that planted fear deep within me. Suddenly, the door behind us slammed shut, sending echoes down the hall. It reverberated like a death knell. I whipped around, panic settling in like a layer of ice. "We're trapped." "Not yet," Jason said, quickly scanning the room. "There has to be another way out." The screens in the command center illuminated with garbled images, the same haunting voice from the transmission permeating the air. "You must return. The truth lies beyond." "What does that mean?" I mumbled, fumbling with nerves. I glanced between my friends and Jason, who also seemed to be piecing things together. "Maybe it's about us," I suggested weakly, the uncertainty settling in my chest. "We were always meant to find this place. It's like they're waiting for us." "They're using us," Mark chimed in, as realization swept over him. I felt a chill creep up my spine. We've been drawn into something far beyond our understanding. The screens began to flicker rapidly, images flashing faster. A countdown appeared again, this time ominously ticking down from 2 minutes. "What now?" Maria shouted, panic lacing her voice. "We can't stay here," I shouted over the rising chaos. "Whatever happens, we've got to find a way to break that barrier. We need to understand what the truth means." That's when the growling from behind us intensified, echoing ominously throughout the room. It felt like the darkness was consuming everything around us. "Quick!" Jason shouted. "Try using the transmitter. Maybe you can communicate with whatever this is." I nodded, frantically moving toward the transmitter, which was nearly obscured by screens. "Be ready!" I yelled to my friends, adrenaline rushing through my veins as I pressed buttons, trying to access anything that led me closer to our escape. Then, the unmistakable outline of the creature began to seep into the room, eyes glowing with an otherworldly light. My fingers fumbled, energy pulsing with urgency as I activated the transmitter, praying it would work. "Show us the way out," I implored, tears stinging my eyes. "Please, we don't want any part of this." As the light from the device flickered, a resonating hum filled the air, mingled with the growling of the creature. Jason, Mark, and Maria huddled close as the walls began to tremble. "Look," Mark yelled, pointing towards one of the screens. It displayed a fleeting image, a door, shimmered and ethereal, half hidden beneath chaotic data and static. "That's it," I shouted. "There! We can break through." "Let's go," Jason urged, the fear seeping into his voice now. We hastened toward the screen, but as we approached, the creature lunged at us. I gasped, instinct taking over. "We have to go now." With one last surge of will, I pressed a final button. The room exploded in light. All at once, the chaos dissolved into a brilliant burst, the darkness receding, windows shimmering as if they were mere reflections. We pushed through, propelled by hope and fear. And just like that, we were through. The world turned bright before my eyes. But as the blinding light faded, I found myself standing in open air. We were outside, back at the facility, yet we were somehow different. It was as if we had crossed a threshold, reshaping the very fabric of our reality. We stood in silence, absorbing the night sky above us, the stars twinkling silently. There was no sign of the creature or the chaos inside the building. But as the quiet enveloped us, I felt the weight of uncertainty still lingering. The truths remained veiled, unanswered. Were we truly free, or merely escaping one haunt for another? "I don't want to go back there," Maria whispered, her voice filled with lingering dread. I nodded, my heart heavy with questions about what we had experienced. "We can't forget what happened," I murmured. "At least, not yet." Sometimes the most significant truths lie in the shadows, the ones we may never understand. I stared back at the distant figure of the facility, wondering about the mysteries it still held. As we turned to leave, I couldn't help but think about the thin veil between worlds, between the supernatural and the real. Would this ever truly be over? But for now, we were alive. I took a breath, glancing at Mark and Jason. The bond we had forged against that dark experience would carry us forward, even if the questions lingered long after our escape.